Hi, it's Alistair McIntyre of Electric Scotland. I just wanted to put a couple of thoughts here on this general election that we're having now, and also IndyRef2. It kind of occurred to me that if you look at the negotiating stance between Britain and the EU, that this is obviously a 2-year kind of divorce thing that we're going through. And it kind of struck me that I see it pretty pointless in asking for an IndyRef2 until, certainly year 2000, 2002, 2022. Because by going through this negotiation with the EU, bearing in mind we're trying to unpick about 40 years of being tied together, and it's going to be a real challenge. But if you consider Scotland and England getting a divorce, that's 300 years of working together. So if anything, that would be more complex than getting out of the EU. And so I really think that we should sit back and really look hard at how this Brexit deal is going to work out. And I also believe that the SNP really need to rethink the strategy, because they really want to get way involved in this Brexit deal and be part of the real negotiating team, whereas everything they say at the moment is basically against Brexit. And they just don't want to play a part in the British negotiations. They say they do, but they actually don't give a damn. And frankly, they're not going to learn anything unless they really get involved in nitty-gritty. Because after all, Scotland doesn't have any diplomats or any trade negotiators. And frankly, the rest of the UK are hampered that way as well. Although I think they had 40 trade negotiators within the EU. But, the EU's got 700 trade negotiators. So any negotiation going on is bound to be difficult. We will come to a resolution one way or another. I also, the more I've been looking at it, I've always been against being a member of the EU. And I've been particularly against being a member of the EU in an independent Scotland. Because to me, why are we fighting to get out of the UK and then basically giving all the advantages of independence up to go into the EU, where we'll be even more tightly controlled than we are under the UK? It makes no sense to me whatsoever. And so this SNP's fixation on being a member of the EU, to me, is just ridiculous. And any people that want a genuinely independent Scotland should be horrified about being locked into the EU. It is the height of stupidity, in my view. So I think we need to knock this IndyRef2 on the head until, frankly, the next general election that comes along. Because that will allow us to really see all the problems and issues, because all of those will happen if Scotland and England break up. So I really would like you to consider that, because it's not going to be easy to break up England and Scotland. Alex Salmond said, a couple of years, no problem. Well, we've got 2 years with the EU, so let's see how that goes and all the problems that are going to come out of it. And is it going to be pretty bitter at the end? It may well be. What happens if Scotland gets independence and England decides, well, up you, mate, don't buy any Scottish products anymore, get the hard border up, and to hell with Scotland. Because after all, as everyone is being told, we sell 4 times more to England than we do to the rest of the EU. So that's our biggest market by far, yet we seem to just be ignoring that. So I just want to put it to you that IndyRef2 right now should be a non-starter. We need to see what Brexit brings out. We need to learn from Brexit. And we need to also start talking up Scotland. I mean, at the moment, there's very little hard information about how Scotland could be an independent country. I mean, for example, being in the EU, we still have all these problems with the fishing industry. Yet the fishing industry should be a $2 billion pound deal annually for Scotland. And it could restore some of our rural communities. Because after all, being a member of the EU, it costs us 100,000 jobs in the fishing industry. I mean, why would you want to join an organisation that does that to Scots? If William Wallace was still around, he'd be taking a sword to Juncker and all of the EU. He wouldn't have allowed that to happen. But basically, the SNP said, oh, no, we're perfectly happy with the EU. Yes, they destroyed 100,000 jobs in Scotland, but so what? We don't care. All we want is independence or bust. And we're going to be bust. I mean, I'm certainly at this stage against, I mean, believe you me, an independent Scotland under the SNP, that is my worst nightmare. Because the SNP have proved they can't run Scotland. They just can't run the country. They're so fixated on independence or bust. It is just the height of stupidity. And to be in the EU instead of the UK is also the height of stupidity. And if you agree that in fact Scotland should be in the EU, then you need to seriously consider whether your brain is damaged. I mean, there are no benefits whatsoever in being in that single market. We haven't increased trade with the EU. It's about 15%, I think, we do into the rest of the EU. And that's flatlined for 15 years. Clearly our exporters haven't taken any advantage of the EU. And all this talk about we get so much benefit out of the EU, you've got to realise that we put more into the EU than we get back from the EU in grants and all kinds of other things. So, I mean, the EU is doing nothing for Scotland. Absolutely nothing. And Britain was right to decide on Brexit, because we've got arrogant people there that are not even democratically elected. The Commission are a dictatorship. So, I just want you to kind of wake up a bit. There's no reason Scotland can't be independent, but we start to need to have discussions about how Scotland could become an independent country and how we would succeed at it. I've seen nothing so far about just words, but no facts. How are we going to do it? We have a £15 billion deficit right now, and that's getting larger. How do we deal with that 15 billion? Where are we going to get the money to plug that 15 billion deficit? One of the ways would be the fishing industry. Well, it would be 2 billion off. Where else can we go? Why aren't we talking about these things? Anyway, I just wanted to raise that to try to make people think. I have no problem with Scottish independence, but we need a case for Scottish independence. Not this emotional, oh, we want to be an independent country. You've got to remember that when you look at the Union of the Parliaments in 1707, a lot of Scots didn't want it, but it got pushed through. But it proved that 50 years on into the Union, Scots did remarkably well with that. And don't forget also that we were bankrupt at that stage, because the Darien scheme, the big Scottish hope, I mean, basically bankrupted a whole pile of wealthy Scots. And so we were literally bankrupt at that time, yet England bailed us out after the Union. No one really talks about these kind of things. And also, if you try to do history research, and that's one of the other problems, is basically Scots don't really spend any time looking at our history. And that is just appalling to me. History can teach you so much, so you don't make the same mistakes all the time. But I can tell you, the union of the parliaments between Scotland and England was a great benefit to Scotland, because it got us into America, it got us into places in the world that we'd never been able to trade, because we were being blocked for doing any trade in those countries. But after the Union, we got access to these markets, and by golly, did we make a a real profit out of that. That's why Glasgow became so rich and wealthy. It was the second city of the empire, basically. Brilliant. But the Union of the Crowns, Union of Parliaments made that possible. So I think you need to open your eyes and just look at where we're going. I mean, together we're very strong indeed. Separate, I don't know. I frankly think England, because after all, England's subsidising us currently to this tune of about 15 billion a year. And that's quite realistic. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, because we're a union, everyone should be dealt with the same. But it costs a lot more in Scotland because we've got all these rural communities and out in the outer islands, and all of that costs more money. I mean, even the big food giants were saying that if they separated, there maybe have to be additional shipping costs charged on to Scotland because of the sheer distances involved. And that's not being nasty, that's just being practical. But because UK is one country, they can't charge more to Scotland than they do to England. It would be disaster. But if we were independent, that takes that away. And they say, well, it costs us more, so you're going to have to pay for it. Sorry, we're not looking at things like that. And we need to. So study your history and just see what the Union did for Scotland. And I say, Scotland's a huge advantage of it, more than any other part of the UK. Scotland really took advantage of that. And I mean, look at Hong Kong. I mean, it was almost run by Scottish traders. Look at the trade we did with America. It was phenomenal at that time. So all I'm basically saying is, I say, please read your history and understand what's happened. Think about today how much we can learn from this Brexit process if, in effect, Scotland voted to be independent. Because that last one, we would have had 2 years of negotiations to actually separate our two countries. The similarities are amazing. So we want to sit back and watch how that plays out. Now, once the agree's done and we're out, let's see how it works over the next few years. So, to my mind, we shouldn't even be looking at another independence referendum until the next general election in 5 years' time. So, there you go. That's my thoughts and things. I hope maybe you'll start to study some of the history, because, frankly, it just tells us so much, and we can learn from that. Okay, anyway. That's maybe my point. Hope you agree with me, but feel free to comment. Cheers.